He was alone in his kitchen when his arm went numb. His words began to slur. And instead of freezing, he did one thing that bought him time before the ambulance arrived. I'm Dr. Howard Tucker. I've spent decades studying longevity, emergency medicine, and what actually saves lives after 60. And today's story still stops me cold because this man didn't use luck. He used knowledge. Sitting with me is someone who has spent more than a century observing the human body under pressure, a physician who lived through war, medical revolutions, and the quiet truths modern medicine sometimes forgets. Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, Japanese physician, longevity expert.
Thank you, Howard. What happened to that man was not rare. What he did next was.
That's the part I want to slow down on, because most seniors are told strokes are sudden, unstoppable, and purely a matter of fate. But science tells a different story. According to data from the National Institutes of Health and the American Stroke Association, many strokes evolve over minutes, not seconds. That window is small, but it exists. And what you do inside that window can change outcomes.
Yes. The body often whispers before it collapses. Weakness, facial heaviness, confusion that feels subtle at first. Most people wait. That waiting is where damage accelerates.
So in this episode, we're not talking about prevention from years ago. We're talking about what happens during a stroke, what the body is doing, what the brain is losing, and what one simple action can do to slow that loss. We'll explain why this works physiologically, how it affects blood flow, oxygen delivery, and clot behavior, and why seniors, in particular, respond so strongly to it. But we're not giving away the full method yet, because understanding why it works matters just as much as knowing what to do.
Not to replace emergency care, but to protect the brain while help is coming. When people understand the reason, they remember it under stress, and memory saves lives.
So stay with us, because what stopped the stroke mid-attack wasn't strength, it wasn't medication, it was timing, positioning, and a body responding exactly as it was designed to. Dr. Hinohara, let's start here. What is actually happening inside the brain in the first moments of a stroke, and why those moments are not as hopeless as people believe? Let's start with the first critical moments, the part most people never see. When a stroke begins, what is actually happening inside the brain before the damage becomes permanent?
In the first moments, the brain is not dead. It is panicking. Blood flow slows or becomes blocked. Oxygen drops. Nerve cells stop communicating clearly, but many of them are still alive. They are waiting.
That's a key distinction. Waiting, not failing. Because seniors are often told that once a stroke starts, everything is already lost.
That belief is dangerous. In reality, the brain enters a survival mode. It reroutes signals. It lowers activity. It tries to protect itself from total collapse. This is why early symptoms feel strange, but not always dramatic.
Like heaviness, tingling, trouble forming words, confusion that comes and goes.
Exactly. Those are not random. They are warning flares. According to research published by the National Institutes of Health, neurons can survive several minutes with reduced blood flow if oxygen demand is lowered quickly.
Which means the clock hasn't run out yet.
Correct. But the clock is running. Every second matters. And what the body does during those seconds determines how much tissue survives.
So this is where the idea of a mid-attack intervention becomes real. Not stopping the stroke entirely, but slowing the damage.
Yes, the brain has what we call a penumbra, a surrounding zone of threatened but salvageable tissue. That zone can be protected temporarily if circulation dynamics change.
That's critical, because emergency medicine focuses on restoring blood flow later. But this is about protecting the brain before help arrives.
Exactly, and seniors are uniquely affected here. Aging brains are more sensitive to oxygen loss, but they also respond strongly to changes in posture, pressure, and breathing.
Which most people never consider during an emergency.
Because panic takes over. The body stiffens, blood pressure spikes, oxygen demand increases, that accelerates damage.
So the worst thing isn't just the clot, it's the stress response layered on top of it.
Correct. Stress narrows vessels further. It increases heart rate. It worsens ischemia. Calming the system is not comfort. It is physiology.
And this is where the man in our opening story made a different choice. He didn't fight his body. He worked with it.
Yes, he unknowingly supported cerebral perfusion at the exact moment it mattered most.
We'll explain how. But before we do, we need to understand one more thing. Why seniors often miss these early signs and why waiting feels reasonable in the moment.
Because the symptoms don't feel dramatic. They feel confusing, and confusion delays action.
That's where we're going next. Why strokes trick the mind, and how to recognize the moment without fear. One of the most dangerous parts of a stroke isn't the clot, it's the hesitation. Why do so many seniors feel something is wrong but still choose to wait?
Because strokes rarely announce themselves loudly at first. They whisper. The brain becomes confused, not alarmed. People feel off, not endangered. That false calm is what delays action.
I've seen it in my own patients. They sit down, they tell themselves it will pass. They don't want to overreact.
And the brain helps them rationalize. When oxygen drops, judgment weakens. Decision-making slows. The very organ that needs help becomes less able to ask for it.
So the stroke interferes with the ability to recognize the stroke.
Exactly, this is well documented. Studies in the journal Stroke show that early ischemia reduces executive function first. That means planning, urgency, and judgment decline before strength or consciousness.
Which explains why people say things like, "I didn't think it was serious yet."
Yes. The brain protects itself emotionally by minimizing danger, especially in seniors who have lived through discomfort before. They are used to pushing through symptoms.
There's also fear. Fear of hospitals, fear of being wrong, fear of causing trouble.
Fear increases hesitation, and hesitation increases damage. This is why education matters before the emergency, not during it.
Because once confusion sets in, logic is already compromised.
Correct. That's why rehearsed knowledge saves lives. When the mind cannot reason, it falls back on memory and habit.
This brings us back to the man in the kitchen. He didn't decide what to do in that moment. He remembered.
Yes, his body responded faster than his fear. That response reduced stress, slowed oxygen demand, and supported blood flow to vulnerable brain tissue.
And that response didn't require strength, or medication, or equipment.
It required positioning, breathing, and understanding how the body behaves under pressure.
Which is exactly what we'll break down next. The principle behind the action. Not the step itself yet, but why it works at a biological level.
Because when seniors understand the reason, they don't panic, they act.
And acting early is what separates recovery from regret. When we come back, we'll explain the one physiological shift that can buy the brain time during a stroke, and why it works even before medical treatment begins. Now we reach the turning point, the part people don't expect. What actually buys the brain time during a stroke before treatment begins?
It comes down to oxygen balance and pressure, not medication, not force. The brain survives when oxygen demand drops faster than oxygen supply.
That sounds simple, but most people do the opposite in an emergency.
Yes. Panic increases heart rate. Breathing becomes shallow. Blood pressure spikes. All of that raises the brain's demand at the exact moment supply is compromised.
So the brain is being asked to work harder with less fuel.
Exactly. That mismatch is what kills tissue, not instantly, but progressively.
And this is where the body still gives us leverage.
Yes, the human body has built-in mechanisms to protect the brain during low oxygen states. We see this in divers, in people fainting, in certain reflexes that shift blood toward vital organs.
Meaning the body already knows how to prioritize the brain.
It does, but stress shuts those mechanisms down. Calm activates them.
That's counterintuitive. Most people think action means movement, effort, doing more.
In this case, doing less is more. Reducing strain, lowering resistance, allowing blood to move where it is needed most.
So the intervention isn't about fighting the stroke.
It's about cooperating with physiology, supporting cerebral perfusion, protecting the penumbra, buying minutes.
And those minutes matter.
They matter immensely. Studies from the NIH show that every minute of untreated ischemic stroke can destroy nearly 2 million neurons. Slowing that process changes outcomes.
Which reframes the goal. Not stopping the stroke, but slowing the damage curve.
Correct. Think of it as putting the brain into low power mode while help is on the way.
And this is something seniors can do without tools, without training, without risk.
Yes, but only if they understand the principle ahead of time. Because under stress, memory guides behavior.
That's why we're holding back the exact step. Because without understanding this foundation, people either forget it or misuse it.
Exactly. Knowledge without context disappears under fear. Understanding stays.
When we come back, we'll connect this principle to the body directly. How posture and positioning influence blood flow to the brain in real time.
And why one position can quietly protect the brain, while another can make things worse.
This is where everything becomes practical. This is where theory meets the body. How does something as simple as posture or positioning change what happens in the brain during a stroke?
Blood does not move in isolation. It responds to gravity, pressure, and resistance. The brain is especially sensitive to these forces during a stroke.
Meaning how the body is positioned can either help or harm blood flow to the brain.
Exactly. Certain positions increase strain on the heart. Others reduce venous return. Some raise intracranial pressure without people realizing it.
And in an emergency, most people instinctively choose the wrong one.
Yes, they pace. They sit upright and tense. They lie flat and panic. Each of those can worsen cerebral stress depending on the situation.
That's surprising to hear, because those reactions feel natural.
Natural does not always mean protective. When fear takes over, muscles tighten. Breathing shortens. Pressure inside the skull can rise.
Which is the last thing the brain needs when blood flow is already compromised.
Correct. The goal is not comfort. The goal is optimal perfusion. Getting enough blood to the brain with the least resistance.
So posture becomes a tool, not a detail.
Yes. Studies in emergency neurology show that head and body positioning can influence cerebral blood flow within seconds, especially in older adults.
Because aging blood vessels are less elastic.
Exactly. Small changes in pressure or angle have a larger impact. What a younger body tolerates easily, an older brain may not.
This explains why seniors can worsen a stroke unintentionally.
Without knowing it, they strain, they brace, they hold their breath. All of this steals oxygen from vulnerable brain tissue.
And the man in our story avoided that trap.
He did. His body entered a protective state instead of a defensive one.
That decision didn't happen by accident.
No. It happened because he had heard this information before. He didn't need to think. He remembered.
Which brings us to the most important question. When exactly should this be used? And when should it not?
Because timing matters and misuse matters.
That's where we're going next. Who this is for, who it's not for, and how to recognize the right moment without guessing. Before we explain the full action, we need to draw a clear line. This is not for every situation, and it's not meant to replace emergency care.
Correct. This is a bridge, not a cure. It is meant to protect the brain while help is on the way, not delay calling for help.
So let's be very clear. When should this be used?
The moment stroke symptoms appear and emergency services are being contacted or already on the way. Weakness on one side, trouble speaking. Facial droop, sudden confusion.
Meaning action and calling for help happen together.
Always together. Never instead of. Time to hospital treatment still matters. This simply protects the brain during that time.
And when should this not be used?
If the person loses consciousness, if there is severe trauma, or if breathing becomes unstable. In those cases, standard emergency protocols take priority.
That distinction is critical, because seniors sometimes hesitate out of fear of doing the wrong thing.
Which is why clarity saves lives. This method is gentle, low risk, but it requires awareness.
Another concern people raise is blood pressure. Many seniors worry about making it worse.
That is understandable. But panic raises blood pressure far more than this method ever could. The goal here is stabilization, not stimulation.
And this is where mindset matters.
Yes. Calm is not passive. Calm is protective. It lowers oxygen demand. It steadies circulation. It supports survival.
The man in our story didn't think, I'll stop a stroke. He thought, I'll give my brain a chance.
That framing matters because when people feel empowered instead of helpless, the body responds differently.
Which brings us to the final step.
Yes. Now that the science is clear, the timing is clear, and the boundaries are clear,
We can finally explain the action itself
step by step, simply, safely.
and why seniors should practice remembering it before they ever need it. Now we put everything together. The science, the timing, the positioning. What exactly did he do in that moment?
He lowered his body. He did not stand. He did not pace. He did not sit upright in tension.
He changed position deliberately.
Yes. He lay down on his side, not flat on his back, not face down, on his side.
And he kept his head slightly elevated. Not high, just enough to reduce pressure.
Correct. This position supports venous drainage while maintaining cerebral blood flow. It reduces strain on the heart and lowers intracranial pressure.
That alone already helps the brain.
It does. But there was one more part.
The breathing.
Yes. Slow, deep, controlled breathing through the nose. Longer exhales than inhales.
That signals the nervous system to stand down.
Exactly. It lowers heart rate, reduces blood pressure spikes, decreases oxygen demand in the brain.
So the brain is asking for less at the same time. Blood flow is being supported.
That balance is everything. That is what protects the penumbra.
And he did not move unnecessarily.
No. Movement increases demand. Stillness preserves tissue.
This sounds almost too simple.
Simple does not mean weak. The body has used this response for survival for thousands of years.
Side lying, head supported, slow nasal breathing.
Yes. While emergency services are contacted or already on the way.
This is not a treatment.
It is a protective posture.
And why is this especially important for seniors?
Because older blood vessels respond more dramatically to stress and pressure. Reducing strain can preserve function longer.
That explains why he regained speech clarity before the ambulance arrived.
He bought time, and time saved neurons.
This is something every senior should remember.
Not in fear, but in confidence.
Because knowing what to do replaces panic with purpose.
And purpose changes physiology.
In our final section, we'll talk about how to remember this under stress and how to mentally rehearse it so it comes automatically.
Because preparation, not reaction, is what truly saves lives.
Knowing this only helps if it comes back to you in the moment. Under stress, under fear. How do seniors make sure this doesn't disappear when it matters most?
By rehearsing it when they are calm. The brain does not rise to the occasion, it falls back on what it remembers.
That's something emergency medicine has proven again and again.
Yes. Pilots, surgeons, first responders. They all train not because they expect panic, but because panic erases thinking.
And seniors deserve that same advantage.
Absolutely, this is not about strength or speed, it is about familiarity.
So how do you rehearse something like this?
You picture it. You imagine the early signs, the heaviness, the confusion, and then you imagine the response. Side lying, head supported, slow breathing.
No rushing, no guessing.
Exactly. Mental rehearsal activates the same neural pathways as physical practice.
Meaning the body remembers even when the mind is overwhelmed.
Correct. That is why the athletes visualize, and why seniors should too.
How often should this be done?
Briefly, occasionally, not obsessively, just enough to make it familiar.
Because fear comes from uncertainty.
And certainty creates calm. Calm protects the brain.
There's also something empowering here.
Yes. It restores agency. Instead of waiting helplessly, seniors know they have a role.
Not to cure, but to protect.
And that shift alone reduces stress hormones, which further helps blood flow.
So the act of remembering becomes part of the treatment.
Exactly, the brain responds to belief and preparation.
That's a powerful thought.
It is, because aging does not mean surrender. It means wisdom.
In our final moments, I want to leave listeners with one clear takeaway.
A sentence they can remember.
Something simple, something steady. Most people think survival comes down to strength, or speed, or luck. But what saved this man wasn't any of those.
It was memory, and the body's ability to respond when the mind could not.
He didn't fight the stroke. He didn't outthink it.
He gave his brain space, time, oxygen.
And that raises a quiet question.
How many outcomes change not because of medicine, but because of what happens in the minutes before medicine arrives?
That question matters, because emergencies don't ask if you're ready.
They only reveal whether you are.
If this information never needs to be used, that's the best outcome.
But if it does, remembering it could mean the difference between recovery and loss.
Side, support, slow breath.
Simple, human, powerful.
And here's what most people never realize.
The body already knows how to survive.
It just waits for permission.
The next time your body whispers, will you know how to listen?